each of the panels finish before we go into questions. So with that, any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, we'll call up our first testifier, which is a panel from the Massachusetts Cannabis Coalition, starting with Ryan Dominguez.
Chairman Donahue, Chairman Gomez, and honorable members of the committee. My name is Ryan Dominguez, and I'm the Executive Director for the Massachusetts Cannabis Coalition. We're a trade association that represents over 70 licensees across the state. That includes single retailers, testing labs, vertically integrated operators, and delivery operators as well. Another single operator has joined me here today. So on behalf of the MCC, I want to thank the committee for recognizing our industry struggles and hosting this hearing. To start, I want to note that the MCC has been grateful for the work, current and past, of the CCC. Creating a cannabis program from scratch is no small feat. And we continue to have productive conversations with both the commissioners as well as the staff, and they're hosting public listening sessions and hearings to understand our issues. However, as you'll see from the testimony from some of my members, there's a disconnect between the CCC's many meetings and the implementation of changes, including the industry's regulatory proposals. We were one of the first states in the Northeast to legalize cannabis for adult use. And now we have to compete with nearly every state in New England, as well as the tri-state. Our industry is in urgent need of regulatory efficiency to keep us alive, let alone competitive. And this requires us to have a strong regulatory body that adapts to a fast-developing industry. But we also need a state legislature. We're looking to you as experts to lead us into the next phase of our industry. We cannot delay the many legislative and regulatory changes needed to support business owners today. We need debates on governance and structure to go hand in hand to changes in our program. We're a mature market now. Massachusetts is the 4th largest adult use market in the nation. In FY24, Massachusetts brought in $272 million in tax revenue, and we have surpassed $1 billion in tax revenue overall. But we're putting all of that at risk if you don't act quickly. According to the CCC, we have had 37 businesses close down. Annual agent registration applications are also down. This year, the Commission received just over 27,000 applications for new employees, compared to 2022, when the CCC received close to 43,000 annual agent registration applications. That's a lot fewer job opportunities. We will lose more businesses and employment opportunities if you don't act. So, as the MCC, we recommend that the committee act quickly to determine the direction of the oversight of our industry, ensuring safeguards to keep our industry going no matter what direction you choose. We also are asking to pass legislation to create regulatory efficiency through changes in purchase and possession limits, advertising changes, testing, and many other recommendations that we'll put forth to you over the next couple months. Finally, we recommend the committee research and analyze our current market to better understand what makes sense from a market size perspective. This will allow us to effectively address the price compression, oversupply, and oversaturation that is currently hurting our industry. I'll stop there and let my members get some time and get into specifics about their experiences as licensees. And first, I want to introduce Megan Dobro from Safety Labs.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, thank you so much for having us. It's really nice to have a listening session, and I am optimistic about where we're going. My name is Megan Dobro. I'm the founder and CEO of Safetiva Labs. We're a testing lab in Westfield. In 2019, I left my tenured position as a biology professor to pursue a license from the CCC to open a testing lab. There were only 2 fully operating labs at the time. 3.5 years later and several $1 million later in borrowed money, I finally had a license, but so did 12 other labs and then 16, which is more than the market can support. 3 labs have since gone out of business. The main value of a legal market is the assurance to the public that the products in dispensaries are tested and therefore safe and accurately labeled. But we have a testing crisis that stems from vague regulations and market pressures. It means that potentially unsafe products are getting to consumers and labels are often inaccurate. I see three main problems to the current structure, and I will pair them with what I think are the solutions. Number one, testing labs are charged with ensuring the safety of products, but it's the producers of those products that pay our bills. So each testing lab has to wrestle with the daily pressures around keeping their scientific integrity and prioritizing public safety over keeping their own doors open. Solution: we need to make the testing data public and make regulations so clear and standardized that outliers in testing data stand out clearly. There are a lot of loopholes that need to be closed around testing. Some limits don't make sense, and there's absolute silence around some big questions. The testing labs have a wealth of expertise to contribute to changes, and we need two-way communication and regular meetings with commission leadership and testing staff. This was how it was done under DPH, and we want to return to that model. Number two, it is too expensive and burdensome to operate a cannabis business en masse, and it has created so much competition that people are compromising their ethics out of desperation. We have so many labs and so many producers, invoices are going unpaid, and good companies are going out of business. We have set everyone up to fail, and it's the consumers and patients who are losing. The solution: we need a moratorium on new licenses and a statewide cap by license type. We need to lighten the load on businesses by relaxing the hurdles that were built on fear. The requirements around badging, transportation, training, security, metric tagging, and advertising are causing unnecessary expense and burden, and they need to be changed quickly. Number three, I'm speaking for my clients on this one because they fear retaliation. Most business owners want to do the right thing, but they often don't know what the right thing is. Asking questions is a risky and often unsatisfactory avenue. Notices of deficiency are given out so liberally, and often the cause was that the regulations were too vague, and you never know when you're going to be issued a massive fine, so businesses try to hide things or they don't ask the question. Even inspectors have different interpretations of the regulations and give different answers to different licensees. Solution: we need clearer regulations and a portal for anonymous questions asked by licensees and an FAQ section with a recorded answer. I want to know that all licensees are being held to the same rules without retaliation or special treatment. The list of questions would give regulators direction about what still needs tightening in the regulations. The Commission has hardworking and dedicated staff. I don't want to prescribe what needs to change about the culture and the system at the CCC because I'm not in it, but as a business owner and protector of consumer safety, I know we can't wait for change. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Peyton Schubrick. I'm CEO and founder of Six Bricks, an adult use dispensary in Springfield, Massachusetts, my hometown. Six Bricks is a play on the last name Schubrick, with 6 people in my immediate family, with a focus on people, plant, and purpose, as we deliver that every day, connecting customers with the best product for them. Last month marked 2 years since Six Bricks opened, and since then I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of this industry. Today I come to you voicing the many concerns of voiceless operators who have sacrificed time, energy, and money, but have been met with a lack of leadership and oversight to support their success. I would like to share a visual with you all that highlights the many issues in industry, and I do have copies for you all as well at the conclusion of this. I think what's important to note is while you're aware of the many challenges, the time spent today should focus on the potential solutions available. The first major issue that we need to address is urgency. Right now, major changes are needed, and we don't have months to act. Recent data highlights the urgency of addressing canopy oversupply in Massachusetts. According to the CCC's data room, there are currently 4 million square feet of licensed canopy in the state, with an additional 375,000 square feet in the final licensing phase, and 4.8 million square feet in provisional licensing. A potential solution available today is tier relegation, as outlined in 935 CRM 500. Without this, we are looking at catastrophic results. Additionally, given the CCC has 3 paid researchers, until a capacity study is completed, a pause on licensure with a carve-out for social equity and economic empowerment licensees could support a more balanced industry. We would not be the first to do this. Vermont Cannabis Control Board outlined that they would stop accepting new retail applications last month with the cutoff date of November 15th, 2024. Additionally, we should be looking to leverage known frameworks such as the Alcohol Business Commission to address accounts payable and pricing issues. And additionally, as we think about urgency, we need to consider loosening restrictions around marketing that allows us as cannabis business to attract and retain customers with loyalty programs, raffles, and act like other businesses in the Commonwealth. Outside of urgency, we need to look at leadership. The only example of a structure like the CCC is the Gaming Commission. The issue that should highlight is the Gaming Commission oversees 10 licensures, while the CCC oversees more than 1,000. We need a structure that allows leaders to respond proactively instead of reactively, and this should be seen in more collaboration to act swiftly, as the structure of the CCC, again well-intentioned, does not support the industry's current growth. Challenges are being met with open meeting law, vacant seats, and too much time lost to implement changes, with the two-driver rule being an example of that. Additionally, we need uniform responses, like an FAQ portal, much like the ABC, that creates consistency in standards and expectations and not showcasing variability depending on the investigator you're assigned. And lastly, as it relates to leadership, we need better knowledge of operator challenges, especially costly challenges that further burden cannabis companies, such as 280E, RVT training, batch testing, and badging requirements. Without action, we are looking to lose a lot as a Commonwealth. Not only will we see the loss of tax revenue, with many operators currently struggling, but we will see a mass exit of talent from the state of Massachusetts. We are already starting to see that with women, people of color, and veterans leaving the industry at higher rates than their counterparts. Additionally, we will continue to lose customers to other states that have higher daily allotments, as Massachusetts currently only outlines 1 ounce, but both New York and Maine are at 2.5 ounces. And lastly, without any changes, we're looking at the loss of innovation as it relates to product, new technologies, and the potential for entrepreneurs that could continue to progress us into a leadership position as we think about the potential of this emerging industry. I thank you for your time, and I'm hopeful to pass out the visual I mentioned at the beginning. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, is it possible we can get that visual?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you like to pass that out now? Or Mariah or Juliana, if you want to grab that. Yeah, any materials, if you like, you can pass to the end, and the staff can distribute it out as well.
Thank you.
First question? Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez, you had testified that businesses, I think it was 37 you said, over the last couple months have closed. Are those businesses that have opened, or those also include license holders as well, that haven't opened yet?
Oh, that includes, so that's from the CCC's activities report.
Okay.
So I know that there may be some data out there that shows a bigger number. I think I've seen somebody quote like 50, but most of those have been open businesses.
Open businesses. So we do have, from my knowledge, also individuals waiting to open that possibly have turned in their licenses as well on top of these businesses.
Yes.
That have been waiting to possibly open.
Yeah, so I think there has been a lot of folks, especially within the social equity program, that were going through the process. Maybe they weren't able to get the funding that they needed. Thankfully, the state put together the Social Equity Trust Fund, and hopefully that'll move people along in the process. But there's folks from Social Equity Cohort 1 that's been trying to go through this process for a long time, and talk to some folks who just couldn't make it happen, and I think they're going to give up their license. So there's probably a number of those that aren't being accounted for.
Also in testimony, what's your name, ma'am, again? Megan, thank you for your testimony today. You had stated that out of the 16 laboratories that receive licenses across the state, that 3 of them have shut down. Are you one of those 3, or
No.
are you still operational?
I'm somehow still operational.
All right, thank you. And then you've also alluded to potential ethics, and obviously I'm not asking you for you to get in between those, what ethics can be and can provide. Just want to make sure that, concrete information is, if somebody's breaking some type of ethics, that those individuals or those ones breaking ethics or possibly doing something illegal should be reported. And obviously, listening to that, fairly interested in what that looks like or have any knowledge towards that. And then obviously the special treatment with the special treatment portion of your testimony as well, individuals receiving special treatment. I have a zero tolerance, obviously, I think a lot of us here on the panel, on individuals receiving special treatment, but then also being cooperative with the CCC and individuals feeling that they're going to be reprimanded for being cooperative or asking questions. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your testimony. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the perspective from licensees as well as your association and kind of bringing the larger view of the whole association. But you talked a little bit about urgency and about regulation, and obviously a lot of the regulations set by the CCC. Can you maybe speak a little bit about, do you believe or do you trust that the CCC will be able to make regulatory changes, or are there issues that may prohibit the CCC from effectively bringing regulatory changes? You had mentioned quite a few different regulation changes that definitely under their purview, so I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, and just to summarize some of the licensees I represent, I think for some of the issue topics they bring to the CCC, they've been talking about the same issue topics for years. I think two-driver rule is like one of those examples. The CCC is currently meeting to potentially change that. But within the context of that, there's also folks who have been trying to push for a expansive change to B2B, which is business-to-business deliveries outside of just delivery to consumer. And that has been going on for a long time as well. So it puts us in a tough position where if we don't get that change through the CCC, we're going to you all as state legislators to be able to probably put that into some type of statute. And it's not probably normal practice for you to put regulations into statute. So we are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place of where do we go in that kind of situation. And as Payton had mentioned, there's a lot of businesses that are struggling here today that need some type of change. And if it's going to take years and years to get that change, it just doesn't make sense for us to keep going down the same road.
I don't understand why things move as slowly as they do, but one reason that I see is that there are currently 3 active commissioners with 5 out of 5 seats. And so when they vote to make change, all 3 have to unanimously agree in order for that change to be made. There's no room for disagreement because there are only 3 seats currently being held. And so if there was a way to change the structure so that commissioners on extended leaves could be replaced by temporary acting commissioners, or if there could be a majority vote on when commissioners are for those that are present when some are absent, I think that could help to make change move faster. I'm sure there's a lot more to it and many layers about why things move slowly, but it's painfully slow.
And that, in my, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
In my opinion, I think that's when statute comes into play, not the regulatory things that you guys are advocating for. And that's just my personal opinion as a co-chair. I think that there is some fine lines, which me and the co-chair have been, in agreement with, that we feel that could be changes in trying to figure out along those lines, especially when it comes to badging, when it comes to increasing weight limits on product, but then on exercising rights to votes, and obviously, what's the supermajority, if that works or not, or is only 3? Obviously, we have knowledge that 1 seat is unavailable and one's on extended leave for medical reasons, but for the most part, that position, I think, in my opinion, is a statutory change that we have to look forward to in our next session. But
Yeah, no,
good observation.
yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate those answers. And when you do bring in these ideas of regulatory change, and how do you feel you're received by the CCC, or what avenues of communication do you have with the CCC around the concerns that yourself or your other member organizations would have?
So as I mentioned in the beginning of my testimony, they're really good with picking up the phone, meeting with us, hosting public meetings where they're collecting testimony, hearing out the industry. But as Megan said, we don't necessarily see what goes on behind the scenes. And I think that's the part where, we're all coming to an agreement that this change needs to happen within the industry. We kind of question, why it's taking so long, and we don't necessarily get clear answers on that.
If I could add just quickly. I highlighted the need for urgency, just acknowledging that, as Ryan alluded to, many of the changes have been conversations for months, if not years. And so the reality of not seeing any action, it does start to feel like the definition of insanity. You're asking for the same changes, you know that they make sense, they could ease some of the financial burden and at least create a viable dynamic for you as an owner-operator, but they're not moving at the rate in which the industry is holistically, and that is the largest disconnect. The way in which we are starting to see oversaturation and price compression occur in the market, coupled with the reality that we're not seeing changes come through the CCC quick enough, is creating the stress in which we will eventually see fallout of much more licensure. As someone who's born and raised here in Massachusetts, I see Massachusetts-born brands suffering the most, and that's truly unfortunate when we think about being the fourth largest market in the state, in the country.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Representative Sauter?
So thank you. I appreciate you coming. I kind of want to approach this a little bit. Today I was kind of figuring out and looking at some things all week leading up into this hearing, and I think we're at a very huge crossroad in our cannabis business here in Massachusetts. I think Colorado kind of went through some stumbling blocks but fixed them very quickly. I agree, we are one of the largest blocks doing the most amount of business, and I think we need to treat it a little bit differently. I guess the way let me go back to some of the regulatory. I agree with my colleagues, the chairs, on the fact that I think we need to fix the part of where legislatively I think we need to kind of use what we do in the towns where we have a board of selectmen and they have open meeting law. If there's 3 of them, it's a 2-1 vote, still a majority vote. The problem comes when you have 1-1 or you only have 2. That's a problem. You can't throw, a acting select board member in without a vote, right? So without the people voting. So that would not work, and I wouldn't support that. So, but I do think that we have to legislatively change that so that we can start getting things through. I think where we lose some things is that, and I don't know if it's on us as legislators to be a little bit clearer in the regulations, and maybe you can help me with this, but maybe we need to take away the gray and be more precise on who is the executive board and who is the executive director. Because I think the problem that we have is that we're hitting this bridge, and we're always going to hit this bridge, I think, if the legislature doesn't clearly define that. So I guess, do you see that when you're dealing with the CCC that you can be talking to commissioners, but then you have the executive director kind of circumventing the CCC's kind of thought process, so everybody's kind of on hold?
I think I'll lean back to just say that right now they're going through a period of transition. So I know that they just interviewed for the final candidate for executive director. So I think with the time that I've had with the MCC, there hasn't been some of those folks in those leadership positions. And again, we don't see what's going on behind the scenes. I think we're having the conversations with staff as well as with commissioners, and they do seem to agree with the changes that we're trying to push, especially when they're universally accepted by the industry. But then somewhere in between it gets lost, and we don't see that from our perspective.
Mm-hmm. So one of my biggest fears is with competition and saturation is we've heard over the summer, and we had a lot of advocates come in over the summer from a standpoint of from a lot of the inner city retailers, and those are mostly in the minority communities, minority groups trying to get into this, and having that struggle of trying to get funding. In a lot of cases, it's for them, it's family money that is put in, and they're getting decimated, and they're losing their wealth, and which took them a very long time to get to. So I guess my concern is we have a lot to address, but I guess if we don't try to make this a little bit more competitive based, if we don't address that soon, we could have a bigger problem on our hands where this is a different industry, right? So bankruptcy court, everything from top down is very difficult in Massachusetts because from the federal government standpoint. So what concerns me is that we're going to decimate families, especially in our inner city communities that looked at opportunities. They are struggling through all these regulations also, and we kind of lock them up a little bit in the sense of selling those licenses or getting other investors because of the regulations. Interpretation. Some say it's the way we legislated that, and it's and you represent some of these folks. Or is it the CCC not making it easier for them to be in the market already? I guess I'm asking you as you represent some of them also.
So I'll just go ahead and say too, I think this is a collaborative process, so I think that everybody shares a little bit of responsibility here. I think that when we set up the rules for this industry, I think there was a lot of stigma that we were still trying to battle against. There was a lot of things in terms of what those unintended impacts were going to be. And now that we're, a few years into it, we're starting to see that maybe those didn't actually come to fruition. And I think with cannabis and the new industry, you have to continuously be adapting your policies, your regulations. And so I think, in the same way that the CCC needs to keep up to date, I think the legislature needs to as well. You had mentioned Colorado as an example. Colorado has a agency and a state legislature that is consistently putting out new statutes, new laws, and updating it based on the new science and data that's coming out, based on the new business conditions. So I think in a similar way, we have to look at all of the tax revenue we're bringing in, all of the jobs that we're bringing in, and if we want to protect those, I think it's on the legislature to consider us a priority and to try to push bills on at least every session in that way. So I think there's kind of a shared responsibility for all of us to do that.
Can I just jump on safety, because I just don't want to burn out too much time here, but the safety of the product, that concerns me because we are not, again, an industry that has CDC and those folks kind of overseeing things like we see with listeria outbreaks and all that stuff we have now. So when it's product safety aspect of it, can you just address, the CCC has a lot of power to go in and fix those issues right away. They don't need us to sit here and try to figure that out. So I guess my question is, what are those roadblocks that you're hitting? Because that concerns me, that you're hitting safety roadblocks and there's product going out there that isn't safe. So they have the ability to do that. I get it, they're in a flux and everything else, but it doesn't stop the day-to-day operation of people doing the jobs that they are hired to do, whether they have a leader or not. They need to figure that out. So product safety is foremost the biggest thing that we should be concerned about when you say that. So I guess, can you just focus just on that just for a little bit on what exactly you were talking about from a safety standpoint?
How much time do we have?
Well, briefly, and then you can write to us.
Yeah, I will write it because there's so much, and there are so many problems, and so for me to focus and give you the snapshot is difficult. Part of the problem is that the producers do their own sampling, and so they send their own sample to the lab, and we can only test what we're given, and we don't know what has been done to that sample before we receive it. There isn't a lot of guidance about how testing labs should do the testing, so it's up to us to have our own scientific background and integrity when each individual lab decides how they're going to do that testing. Because every lab interprets the regulations differently, that leads to variability. Because every lab is using different technology, that leads to variability in the results. And when there's variability in the results, the producers are shopping for labs that are going to give them results that allow them to sell their products for more. So they're shopping based on THC numbers being high, they're shopping based on safety checks passing. And so that means that the labs that are passing the most microbial, pesticide, heavy metals, the labs that are passing the most and the labs that have the highest THC are getting the most business. And so we are selecting out the labs that are trying to do things the right way, right? It's incentivized all wrong.
But I believe in the regulation, the CCC has the ability to do their own testing. Am I wrong about that?
If they had a testing lab.
But they can hire somebody. They don't have to. They don't have to have a testing lab. They can send it out to their own testing company that they use for our product testing. So you're saying to me that that's not, and has not been done?
Not to my awareness.
On any of your, you obviously have. So you're telling me that the CCC hasn't been out there testing this product?
Not to my awareness.
That doesn't sound to me like the legislature has any power to do anything. It sounds to me like the CCC just isn't doing what they, given the power that we've already given them from the beginning. So thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from members?
Sure.
Yep. Representative Saunders?
Thank you. And I want to pick up on where you left off, Mr. Chairman, on this difference between regulatory concerns and statutory concerns. And I heard two very clear statutory concerns. And Ms. Schubert, they were both from you. The first is around a licensure moratorium. This is one place where I believe the legislature was clear in its language in statute that the commission shall issue licenses, assuming it meets the four criteria in the statute, 94G. This would be a big shift, and I'm interested, and perhaps this harkens back to one of our hearings earlier this session around the time and the investment that hires have put into the process, along with the largely, at times, unnecessary delay that you faced. But seeing that this would be a significant sea change, how would you justify to the legislature, to the public at large, that we should make a 180-degree turn on how we go about approving licenses?
So as I outlined in my comments, we acknowledge that there are 3 paid researcher roles at the Cannabis Control Commission. The moratorium we're asking for would essentially allow those individuals to do the research to better understand where we currently are within our legalization process and what makes sense. Unfortunately, we are not seeing many data-driven decisions that are being made. And so when you look at oversaturation in communities like Northampton that have over 10 dispensaries, right? But they don't have a population that supports it, it lets us know that as we think about progression forward with oversaturation as well as price compression, in which a 1 gram pre-roll that last year around this time frame sold for $14 is now being sold at $8, that there are multiple things that are working against a lot of the entrepreneurs that put in the time, energy, and money in order to stand up their businesses. And to talk numbers holistically, if you're looking at a standalone retail, you're looking at anywhere between $1 million to $2 million. And unfortunately, what's happening is many of the individuals who chose to enter the industry are exiting, but they're financially worse off. And again, that's disproportionately harming women, people of color, as well as veterans. I'm not going to assume I know all of the answers relative to how we address this, but what I am saying is that the data is clearly telling us that we need to do more research to better understand what this market can actually tolerate before we further progress into additional licensures to ensure that it is a data-driven decision that will support a more balanced industry. Because right now what we are seeing is many groups that are getting desperate are starting to sell product below Keystone. And what is that doing to consumers? It's creating unrealistic expectations on price point while concurrently incentivizing folks to buy older product and then sell that at a cheaper price point. So when we think about the public safety aspect of this, there is a lot at risk.
So tell me if I'm right or wrong here, maybe it's a little bit of both, that taking what we said as the situation on the ground, which I do, and I think that there's a lot of data to support that. It'd be nice for the commission to put its resources at work to confirm that data. That the operators currently have put in a tremendous amount of resource, and that by virtue of that effort, and again, the oftentimes drawn-out process that the commission does, that there ought to be some protection for those operators to recoup their investment in some way, shape, or form, as opposed to, and I guess you can make the case that the market decides, right? That lower prices are better for consumers, and the best operators are going to be the ones to survive because they're offering the best customer experience. Is that a fair
Yeah.
description of the situation?
And so I think, in terms of some of the risks to folks who are invested their life savings and are going through the process, maybe haven't opened up, I think we can build in carve-outs for, specific business types. And I think Payne had mentioned, carving out for SEE. If we wanted to broaden that definition for folks who are already in the pipeline and have invested those dollars, I think that's a big thing. And then I think the way that our system is set up, though, is you have to be vertically integrated if you're doing medical and the like. So I think the economics are just kind of different for single retailers and some of these other businesses. So I think, again, economic analysis to all of this and to decide what should be kind of the market size, what is the best route for us to go is something that we need to invest in.
And if I could add, to address your question, I think it's also important to note that throughout the entire licensure process, you have to have control of the property, right? So that means if it took you 14, 16, 18, 24 months, you were paying rent the entire time. So by the time you do open doors, I can give you a key example. We opened in 2022, prices had just dropped by 38%, right? And yet the entire cost of controlling the property, building out the space, hiring employees, none of those fixed costs changed. And so it creates a dynamic where in terms of being able to pay back investors or have conversations about expansion really becomes limiting because we're in an industry where you can't go to a bank. Trying to fundraise in this environment when many of the articles speak to the disarray right now happening within our market creates very few possibilities in terms of progression forward.
I think it's a compelling argument, especially given the challenges that the commission has had in seeing licensure through in a timely fashion. And the last question I have, I don't even want to answer now. The other statutory item that was expressly statutory you mentioned was around advertising. This is a place where the legislature was very prescriptive in what is and is not allowed in statute. So if you could follow up with the committee on thoughts you have about how the statute could be amended to address some of those advertising considerations, be happy to review those as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
So, Mr. Dominguez, could you speak to how other states are regulating cannabis? I've noticed that in Illinois, the commission is under the guise of agriculture, and other places under economic development. Do you have any thoughts about where cannabis should reside?
Yes. So there's two different ways to look at this, and I'll preface it by saying there's not a perfect one-to-one match to another state. I think if you go to operators in any other state, they're going to have similar kinds of complaints. But I think you all as a state legislature can kind of look at what works in some of these states. And so with that, there's two different versions that we've seen. So we have the independent commission like we have here with the CCC, and then we've seen agencies that are nestled under like a agriculture, economic development, under the governor as an executive office or something along those lines. And I think they both have their warts. Obviously, with the independent agency, it does protect, the cannabis industry from an agency or a governor who's not so pro-cannabis. So, it allows them to act independently. But then on the flip side, too, the other agency underneath the governor or an executive office or something along those lines, it can maybe act a little bit more quickly. And so there's goods and bads to both of those, and I think that's up to you all as experts to decide.
Any other questions?